we're going to jump in here next. It's my privilege to be able to share some thoughts and ideas here with you. When I got started on this journey of, I talked a little bit about it. When I went to the Ranching for Profit, not 2023, it was actually 2003. And it was a talk about come up against paradigms, calving in sync with nature, learning about enterprises, learning how to be a steward over more than just the things that we see above ground. We had to look down and see what was happening, right? What was going on in this at the soil surface. And then I began to learn that it's not just the grass that we grow. Like I changed from a cowboy mentality to a grass farmer mentality. And that evolved to a soil microbe farmer. And because of my involvement with the later Langingham, but first Nicole Masters, and she taught a couple of classes that I was blessed to attend, and I realized that wow, this beneath the soil surface, there's this whole world, this whole community that is going on under there, and we have the duty, the responsibility to be able to manage and care and steward these microbes that I didn't even know existed there. Just like Dr. Duggar said with our gut microbiome, there's this whole world that's living beneath our feet. And then I began to learn about that and to experiment with compost and compost teas, and learn to read the Brix readings on grasses, and to improve that, and to learn the art and the science of grass finishing, and how that is so important in balancing the ration of those animals, not on a calculator, but with the age and the stage of the grass, and when it's ready to be grazed, and how much rest and recovery it needs. And so this whole process was quite a journey for me, and something that at the time, I remember when I started learning about like applying compost teas, and I bought a big 80-foot boom sprayer and was out there trying to brew compost and spray it out on my fields. I thought, I don't know what I'm doing here. Is this really going to work? It just seemed there was no evidence, right? I mean, if you spray out a chemical in a couple of days, you can see the weeds die. And yet there was nothing tangible for so long that what I was doing was actually working. And I started to question, and I started to ask, is this really the right path? I don't have the picture in my slides today. Maybe I'll share it tomorrow. But when I had been about this journey for a couple of years of specifically focusing on soil health, one day I was down irrigating, and we've got two different ranches on either side of a mountain range. So we're just kind of right up in against the foothills here in northeastern Nevada, and the mountain range is kind of part of the Ruby Mountains. And so we were at our winter location, and we were out irrigating with my son Weston, and we flood irrigate about 400 to 500 acres, depending on how much runoff water we have off the mountain and snow melt. So just a little context of who I am, where we're from. We don't have pivot irrigation or mechanized irrigation. It's just pretty much diverting water in ditches with tarps, and so we'd set the tarp, and 2 days later we came back to move it up the ditch to be able to turn water out onto the field. And I remember as we walked to the end of those turnouts, and I pulled some sod out of the ditch, and when I where the water was flowing out, and as I pulled that sod out, that piece of sod was just full of earthworms. I mean, just literally dripping with earthworms. And it was an amazing experience to be able to see that the work that I had done, which seemed so unmeasurable for so long, was now at a point where I could see the results of the things that I had done. And I mean, it brought tears to my eyes at that moment, because it was like, okay, Jared, thank you for trusting us. Thank you for earning our trust. And now we can work together. I share that experience because no matter where you're at on this journey, if you're just starting out, if you have no idea what regenerative agriculture is, if you don't own land, if you do own land, it really doesn't matter. The journey needs to start, and wherever you are is the perfect place. And I know that to be true because we have to accept the failures that we've had and everything that's got us to this point, because now is all we have. The past is just a canceled check. The future is a promissory note. Right now is that liquid capital that Chris Miles just talked about. Now is the time that we can choose. And so what are we doing with that gift of time? What are we doing with that gift of this present moment? Are we wasting it? Are we investing it? Are we worried? It's my invitation to you to be present, to live in the present, to live in the now. And that sounds a lot like, well, eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow we're going to die. No, it's not. It's very much saying this is the thing that I have power and control over, is right now. And as I choose to live in the now, that has the most effect, not only on the future, but also on the past, because we can find meaning from our failures and mistakes when we accept where we are right now. And we can gain vision for where we're going when we accept where we are right now. And so I hope that no matter what's got you to this point, you will gratefully acknowledge that, thank that. And a good way to do that is to have a journal and to write about it and to be able to document the lessons that you've learned. You know, I'm an avid journal keeper. My journals are somewhat sporadic, but you know, I try to document the lessons that I learned, and there's power in doing that, right? And I believe it helps us in all areas of our life. Okay, we're going to jump right in. We're going to talk just a little bit about what stewardship is. Okay, so what is stewardship? Stewardship designates a sacred, spiritual, or temporal responsibility to take care of something that belongs to God, for which we are accountable. Something that doesn't belong to us, but we are accountable for that. Stewardship is something that is near and dear to my heart, because I feel that this ranch that we inherited, that we're just stewards here over it for a period of time, even though our name is on the deed. Like, it wouldn't matter if it was. I've leased properties and I've felt that same that weight or that responsibility of stewardship. So here's some principles of stewardship, and I'm going to help you learn some easy ways to be able to remember this. Okay, so I've been taking this little training and I'm learning about how our brain works and how our mind works. And so again, this is participatory, right? And the reason that we do this is so that we can remember. So first principle is everyone is a steward. How many is a steward? Everyone, everybody, everyone, right? So think of the word one. Principle number one, everyone is a steward. In my podcast, I've shared a story about Larry. Larry was a homeless man that I picked up. I don't normally pick up hitchhikers, but it was a cold, cold December night. I was driving home from Wells. He was hiking on the side of the road. He didn't have his thumb up. And I looked at him, I looked at my thermometer in the car, and it was like 10 degrees. I knew it was going to get down below zero. I'm like, certainly this guy's broke down. I didn't see a vehicle indicating that he broke down or out of fuel. And so I turned around, cautiously approached, and I said, "Hey, can I help you?" And he says, "I'm just headed south." I said, "Well, you got a long ways to go. Like, the next town's 120 miles. And he's like, "Yeah, maybe I'll just go back to town." Anyway, I gave him a ride to town, and it ended up that he came and he worked with us, and he spent a Christmas with us a few years ago. And we learned a lot from Larry. We learned that you don't have to own land cattle, horses, trucks, trailers to be a steward. He was a steward over not very much, but he was a steward over the decisions that he made and a steward over what little possessions that he had. And the interesting thing, talk about somebody who could live in the now. I mean, he had a home back in Louisiana. We could have gone back to his mom and his sisters, and I communicated with them. But he chose to. He wasn't a drug addict. He seemed clean as a whistle, and he just chose to live that life and go where he felt he needed to go next. Everyone is a steward. Some of us are stewards over a lot. Some of us are stewards over a little. So principle number one, everyone is a steward. Okay. So two, if we think of H2 in water, there's two hows in here. This is how we're going to remember this. It's how, not how much, that matters. So again, back to Larry, it wasn't that he had a lot, it was how he managed what he has. It's not how much we have, it's how we manage, how we steward what we have. How, not how much. Okay, so as you guys are listening, type these in the chat. Principle number one, principle number two. Principle number one is what? Everyone is a steward. Principle number two, remember the H2, how and how. It's how, not how much we steward that matters. And then principle number three, stewardship is greater than ownership. Hopefully I got the greater than symbol pointed in the right direction. Okay, so stewardship is greater than ownership. Stewardship is not, ownership does not equal stewardship. Like we can be an owner, but not a steward. But if we're going to be a true steward, it may accompany ownership. And ultimately, if we think about it in the grand scheme of things, do we really own anything? Right? Do we even own the body that we have? Probably the only things that are eternal, when Einstein died and they dissected his brain, they didn't find anything in there. His knowledge went with him. I believe went to the next life with him. But everything else was left behind. And so it's what we have up here and the relationships that we gain while we're here on earth. Those are the things that are eternal. So the better that we learn those principles of stewardships, the more we can be trusted with, and we'll talk about that. So stewardship is greater than ownership. So that's number three. The way that I remember three is if you look at this little greater than sign, there's 3 points on it. So one in the front and one on the bottom. So three. And again, just look at the visuals or visualize it if you're listening to the audio. Stewardship trumps or is greater than ownership. And number four, with increased capacity equals increased stewardship. So that little sign in the middle means that what is on one side is equal to what is on the other side. Okay. And which do we have more control over? Increasing our capacity or increasing our stewardships? Well, I believe that if they're going to be in balance, we need to seek for that on the left side of the equation. Increasing our capacity. Being here is increasing your capacity to steward. Like a lot of times we think if we're going to be profitable, I just need to go lease another piece of property and run cows. Maybe you do, but if you do that without increasing your stewardship capacity, then that may be putting the cart ahead of the horse. So have we got those? So let's say them backwards. And the way that I remember this is there's 2 and 2. Increased capacity on one side, increased stewardship on the other, with the equal sign in the middle. So increased capacity equals increased stewardship. Okay. So 2 plus 2 equals 4. So principle number 4. So number 4 is increased capacity equals increased stewardship. Number 3, stewardship is greater than or trumps ownership greater than, and we think about the 3 points on that, greater than sign. H2 for number 2, how, not how much. And principle number 1, everyone is a steward. Yep, regardless of how much we own or whatever, everyone is a steward. So what are your epiphanies from this? What are your takeaways? What are your insights? Whitby versus Whitby. Yeah, I like that. We're going to talk about that quite a bit. That's That's a principle from RFP, right? Where much is given, much is required. Absolutely. I like that. Yes. And if you'll notice, if you go to, and you go and listen to some of my podcasts, I talk about that this stewardship principle is actually biblical, coming from the parable of the good steward. And so as you read that parable, it very much teaches these 4 principles, and probably more, but these are the 4 that rise to the surface. Every one is a steward. The one that was given 5 talents, the one that was given 1 talent. It didn't matter when the day of reckoning came if they had given a return of 5 increased to 10 or 2 increased to 4. What matters was how they did that, not the how much. The one that hid his talent, remember, he was chastised. So the reward for the one who increased from 2 to 4 and 5 to 10, is the way I read it, was the same. You can have you'll be given all that the Father has. And we talked about legacy, right? And that's hard for us to comprehend with our mortal thinking, because if we own a ranch, can you give your children all a ranch? There's only one ranch. So how do you give them equal shares? Well, it doesn't say equal, for one thing. It says all. And as we go back to what Dave taught, what is the legacy that we're leaving? It's far beyond the assets that we have. Like, we're so limited if we think that, okay, we're just going to give assets to our children. If we're just going to give assets, sometimes they can be a millstone around our neck, right? Because if we're not teaching them these principles to increase their capacity to steward, then they may lose them, they may squander them, they may go and hide them. As I read the parable, they were stewards over those talents. They weren't necessarily given them, and there would be a day of accounting when they would have to come, and there would be a reconciliation, right? And so the one with who hid his talent in this parable, who was given 1 talent, hid it, and when the Lord came and said, "Hey, what'd you do with my talent?" He says, "Here it is. I didn't lose it. Here's the 1 talent." That was given to the one who had more talents, right? It was taken from him. So that shows that as our capacity, because the one with 5, he increased his capacity, so he had additional stewardships. So hopefully this is resonating, these 4 principles. And as you think about it, how do we bring this home, right? So another quick story. When I took over management, I told you we had 500,000 acres, over 1,000 cows, multiple employees. I was steward over a lot of stewardships, but my capacity to steward was not equal to my stewardships as I see it now. And it's humbling to see that. It really is. Like, I see now more than what I needed about a training of how to ranch was a training of how to become a steward with increased capacity. And so you're probably wondering, right? Somebody asked the question, okay, so how do you increase the capacity? Right? Somebody's got to be thinking that. I'm thinking that. I'm wondering that. How do we increase our capacity to steward? It's doing the things that you're doing right here. It's learning. Learning in and of itself is great, but it's the application of knowledge combined with experience that leads to wisdom. That is increasing our capacity to steward. So, okay, we'll go ahead and we're going to jump through them. We might actually spend a little more time on these principles next, because I want to give meaning and context to this. So if we think about that stewardship balance here, and I'm maybe not always monitoring the chat. So if somebody, I guess, Justine, you can always text me if you need to, if there's something immediate that we need to address. So, okay, so if we have steward on the left-hand side, we have our stewardships on the right-hand side. As farmers and ranchers, we could be steward over land. represented by the barns, or livestock. And we learned from Chris Miles that we're stewards over money. So those things, when they're in balance, that nature is always seeking for balance. It's always seeking for equilibrium or homeostasis, right? Balance. Think about that. What brings those things into balance? Well, there has to be equal weight on both sides of the scale, right? If this represents a scale or a teeter-totter. When there is equal weight on both sides, and things are brought into balance and things are okay. The reality of life is we're never completely in balance. We're always striving for that. Nature is never completely in balance. It's always striving for that. So how do we increase that? If we focus on the right side and we say, okay, if I'm going to be a better regenerative farmer and rancher, I need to increase my stewardships, but we don't increase the steward, what happens to our stewardships? Sometimes they fall off the scale, right? And then that will lessen the weight and they'll be brought back into balance. Why do lottery winners go broke? Because they didn't focus on the left side. They got a lot of stewardship on the right side, but they didn't increase their capacity on the left side. And so pretty soon it's going to be brought back into balance. That's a law, I believe. And so if you're just listening to the audio, take time and go and watch this, because this is an important to kind of ingrain into our mind. Okay, so ways that we increase our ability to steward. First is to grow the steward. The ways that we grow the steward are to be able to learn. Another way is to manage. I just learned an acronym the other day, which I like, and you can use it too. You can steal it. I did. I'll give credit to Jim Quick where I learned it from. And it's called Kill the Ants. ANT stands for automatic negative thoughts. So it's those thoughts that just automatically trigger and say, oh, you're not good enough. Oh, you failed. You're going to fail again. Sometimes they come in through our own voices. Sometimes they're ingrained in us from the voices of others from outside, even well-meaning people. So manage the ants. I don't want to say kill them, because I like ants. They're important to the ecology, but manage them, right? So the automatic negative voices, those things we can look at them, we can acknowledge them, we can thank them, but we get to choose, right? What happens up here, because what happens in our mind is what is going to dictate what our actions are. Manage the little voices. The other way would be managing the emotions that we experience. And you're like, well, wait a minute. I mean, I just get angry. I'm just an angry person. Well, if you keep telling yourself that, then you always will be. I will never be wealthy, or I'm not wealthy. Just when you have those thoughts, just add something to it. I'm not wealthy yet, right? Somebody commented in the chat earlier, and I don't think I got time to respond to it, but they said, I'm not a farmer, but I want to be. And I think that's something to that line. And I just wanted to add to that. So I'm not a farmer, just add yet. If that's your goal and that's your aspiration, that is managing this left side. That is growing the steward. Okay. So there's other ways. And in another training that I do, I talk more specifically about that. The other thing, if we're going to bring things into balance, is to move that little thing at the bottom, the fulcrum. Somebody wise said, if you give me a big enough lever and I can move the world. So a big enough lever with the fulcrum placed in the right place, we have the ability to have leverage to lift more weight. And so how do we move that fulcrum? One of the best ways that I've found to do that is through business, right? If maybe you don't have aspirations to start a business, but it is a great way to be able to increase the influence that we have in the world and to be able to manage increased stewardships. Okay. And if you guys think of ways, be thinking and put them in the chat. Like, what are ways that you can grow the steward and move the fulcrum to the right? Okay. So business is a great way. Education, it can be both. If you're like educating yourself, you are growing the steward. You're in essence growing the weight on that left side, which can allow you to be able to manage more stewardships. But education as a culture when a rising tide raises all ships. And so if you educate your team, I think that is part of moving the fulcrum to the right. Being a leader is moving the fulcrum to the right. Okay, so you guys getting this? Is it making sense? Next principle, build a team, right? If there's one of us, we can steward a certain number of things. If there's multiple of us, we can do more. An excellent example of this was last year we had 80 live participants on this summit. This year I involved Amy Walker and her team, and you see Justine and Steven in the back of the room, and they're helping to manage. And so we've been able to more than double the amount of people that are on here because we built a team. So who is the team? And I had the thought, are they on the left or the right-hand side of the fulcrum? Like, do we steward people, or are people on the left-hand side on the steward side? And I think the answer is yes. It can be both. If they're on our team, they're on the left-hand side. But as parents, as leaders, and over organizations, the organization or the family unit would be on the right-hand side. But hopefully as individuals, they are on the left-hand side, and that shows that they're truly invested in working for the team. Okay, so with that, what are the key takeaways that you have from this? Stewardship definitely is greater than ownership. Number 2 was H2, how, not how much. Yep. Okay, manage the ants, very good. Which for you, do you have more control over, the right side or the left side? When we think like, okay, I've got to increase my influence, I need to make more money, I need to get this goal that I've set, the tendency is to focus on the right side, right? I need to make more money, I need to have more cows, therefore I need to have more land. And that may be true, but if it's not done in order, and the steps would be grow the steward, build the team, move the fulcrum to the right, then you have the capacity to manage more on this right side. If it's not done in capacity, then we know what happens. Those things fall off, and it will come back into balance. Okay, so hopefully that resonates with you as it does with me. And again, you think back in your lives, and especially where you're at right now, list out your stewardships on the right-hand side. And a lot of times you'll be made aware of the weaknesses that you have on the left-hand side. If we try to strengthen our weaknesses, we'll have a lot of strong weaknesses, right? It doesn't mean that we ignore our weaknesses, but there's 2 ways to be able to grow the steward. One is to focus on your strengths and to grow them. And the other is to focus on your weaknesses. It's a lot funner to focus on your strengths and to build a team around you that complements your weaknesses than just simply trying to make strong weaknesses, right? We will overcome our weaknesses in time. And I believe with God's help, we can overcome our weaknesses. But in the meantime, as we're changing, as we're evolving, as we're growing, build a team around you. The age of the solopreneur, of the rugged individualist, of the guy who has to do everything himself, that's past. I don't know if it ever was an age, right? I mean, most of the pioneers have got arrows in their backs, and the ones who didn't have a team to defend them, I mean, they probably were the casualty in the statistic. So we don't want you to be a statistic. So build a team. What does that look like? Well, we could be part of your team at Ag Steward. And the way that we've structured this is a great start. There are so many of you that this is probably the first time that you're seeing my face. And I'm humbled by that. There's many of you that have been on the summit last year and every webinar since, and I appreciate that. You may not know me, you may not trust me, you may not know what this Ag Steward thing is about, but we hope that you will join us in this journey. If it's right for you, there's a way to be able to take the next step. And we've made it super easy to be able to do that. I'm sure some of you have already gone to the gift page and you've checked that out. You've seen that the price for the follow-up program and for lifetime access is not $2,500. It's actually a pretty amazing price. So this is the invitation. If it's right for you to take the next step, join us next month for the Profitable Steward Sustainable Ranching for the Next Generation. It's a 2-day immersive program. This would be more like, a college, I guess. Maybe that a 2-year college. This next step is going to be more like the college, where you're going to get in the trenches, you're going to do some more college coupled with internship. The graduate school, we have that opportunity as well, right? If you're just like, you're ready and you say, hey, I'm clear on my vision, I'm all in with this, I need some help. You can reach out to Justine here and she'll get you a link. So in the chat, or you can go to the landing page and we should have a way to be able to get there. We can schedule a calendar link for you to be able to jump on if you're at that phase and you're like, okay, I just need help now. I got it dialed in. If you're somewhere in the middle, whether you're starting out and you're saying, okay, I need to get this foundation right to build this legacy business. We need to get profitability to be regenerative. I invite you to join us for this 2-day virtual event to transform your ranch into a legacy. It also includes some other pretty awesome things, which we value this 2-day event at $2,500 because that's how much value we're pouring into it. There's going to be lifetime access to the summit recordings. And also at the end of last year, I recorded a 7-day Build the Steward challenge. That's where I go in depth on how to do the things on the left-hand side to build the steward. Also, you'll have 3-month membership to our mastermind group, where we meet virtually every month. And we're going to learn a principle and we're going to give accountability on how we did with our goals that last month. Like, this is an opportunity to be able to step into something where it's a built-in mastermind. You become the sum of the people that you hang around. If you're not happy with the results that you're getting, look around you. If you want to increase your results, change your environment. And this is a way to do it. And that's really, truly priceless. So there's the value there if you're to pay for all those things individually. And again, if you enter the promo code, which is on the landing page, it's $47. And so we wanted price to not be a reason that you couldn't join us in this journey. Because we hope that, I guess, who is this for? I don't know if I adequately answered this. I believe that we can help anybody on whatever level they're at in their journey, right? But this is specifically for people who are committed to starting a business. They're willing to invest the time, and ideally they have some experience under their belt, right? Startup programs probably would just get you into like the 7-day challenge or something like that. Like, you got to be committed and you got to be willing to dedicate the time. There's going to be some pre-work. It's a working deal. It's not a passive. Like, if you sign up, we expect you to show up to take those 2 days. And yes, there will be a recording, but the recording, as we talked about, won't be the same, right? You need to be there live and just ready. And we're going to dive in, not to an ethereal what if scenario. It's going to be with your business that either you built, are building, or plan to build. Okay.